He stood on the balcony of the most expensive mansion in the state, holding a glass of champagne, laughing as security dragged his wife of 10 years out the front gate. He thought he had won. He thought the prenuptial agreement was ironclad. He thought she was just a penniless housewife he could discard for a younger model. But Grant had made one fatal miscalculation. He didn't read the fine print on the land deed from 1954. He didn't know that the ground he was standing on, the driveway his mistress was parking her Porsche on, and the very gate he locked his wife out of, didn't belong to him. It never did. This is the story of how an arrogant millionaire threw his wife to the wolves, only to realize, too late, that she owned the entire forest. The invitation was embossed with gold leaf, heavy enough to crack a glass table. It read, "The 10th anniversary celebration of Grant and Nora Kensington, black tie only." But for Nora Kensington, staring at herself in the vanity mirror of the master suite, the gold lettering felt like a joke, a cruel, expensive joke. She adjusted the strap of her emerald green gown, a dress she had bought off the rack at a department store because Grant had cancelled her credit cards 3 days ago. Administrative error, he had claimed, without looking up from his phone. The Kensington estate was buzzing. Below her, on the sprawling lawn that overlooked the cliffs of Pacific Heights, 300 of the city's elite were gathering. There were tech moguls, senators, and real estate sharks. They were all there to celebrate Grant Kensington, the man who had turned a small construction firm into a billion-dollar empire. And Nora? She was just the accessory. The quiet woman who poured the tea, smiled at the rude jokes, and looked the other way when Grant came home smelling of perfume that wasn't hers. "Nora!" Grant's voice boomed from the doorway. She flinched. Grant stood there, adjusting his cufflinks. He was handsome in that sharp, predatory way. Silver at the temples, a jawline that looked carved from granite. But his eyes were cold. Dead cold. "You're not wearing the diamond necklace I bought you last year," he said, his voice tight. I couldn't find the clasp key, Grant. It's in the safe, and you changed the combination," Nora replied softly. Grant sighed, a sound of pure exhaustion, as if dealing with her was the hardest part of his day. "You are useless, Nora. Truly. Just put on some pearls and get downstairs. Bella is already there, helping with the guests." Bella. The name made Nora's stomach turn. Bella was Grant's personal assistant. She was 24, blonde, and had been wearing Nora's favorite shade of lipstick for months. Nora took a breath, composed herself, and walked down the grand marble staircase. The house was magnificent. High-vaulted ceilings, imported Italian marble floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the ocean. It was the house Nora's grandmother had lived in. It was the house Nora had grown up in. When she married Grant 10 years ago, he had insisted on renovating it. He tore down the old oak walls and replaced them with glass and steel. He wanted it to look like a fortress of power. As she entered the ballroom, the chatter didn't stop, but the eyes shifted. They looked at her with pity. The wives of Grant's business partners knew. Everyone knew. Grant was holding court near the champagne tower, Bella clinging to his arm like a second skin. Nora walked up to them, forcing a smile. "Happy anniversary, darling," she said, reaching for his hand. Grant pulled his hand away to check his watch. The room went silent. The music seemed to fade. Grant turned to the DJ and made a cutting motion across his throat. The music stopped abruptly. Grant took a microphone. He stepped onto the small dais, dragging Bella with him. "Everyone, thank you for coming," Grant's voice echoed through the hall. 10 years, a decade. It's a long time to build an empire. The crowd clapped politely. Nora stood off to the side, hands clasped together, waiting for the part where he thanked her for standing by him when he was bankrupt in year 2. But, Grant continued, his smile widening, business is about evolution. It's about shedding dead weight to fly higher. Nora's heart hammered against her ribs. Dead weight. Nora and I have had a run, Grant said, looking directly at her now. The pity in the room evaporated, replaced by shock. But I need a partner who matches my ambition, my energy. Someone who represents the future of Kensington Global. He wrapped his arm around Bella's waist. Bella beamed, flashing a diamond ring on her finger that was twice the size of Nora's. So, tonight isn't just an anniversary party, Grant announced. It's a farewell party. Nora, our lawyers have sent the papers to your sister's house. Since you don't check your email, I thought I'd tell you in person. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered with a sharp clink. You're divorcing me? Nora whispered. I'm releasing you, Grant corrected, his voice booming over the speakers. The prenuptial agreement is clear. You get the Honda, $50,000 in cash, and whatever you can fit in 2 suitcases. Security is packing them for you right now. Grant, you can't do this here, Nora pleaded, stepping forward. Not in front of everyone. This is my home. Grant laughed. It was a dry, barking sound. Your home? Nora, look around. I paid for the marble. I paid for the steel. I paid for the roof. This is my house. You've just been a guest who overstayed her welcome. 2 large security guards in black suits materialized behind Nora. One of them, a man Nora had made coffee for every morning for 3 years, wouldn't meet her eyes. Escort Miss Bennet off the premises, Grant commanded, using her maiden name. And make sure she doesn't take any of the silverware. Grant, please, Nora's voice broke. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and humiliating. Where will I go? It's night. Not my problem, Grant said, turning his back to her to kiss Bella. The guards grabbed Nora by the arms. It wasn't violent, but it was firm. They marched her through the crowd of people she had known for a decade, people she had hosted dinners for, people she had bought baby gifts for. Not one of them stepped forward. They parted like the Red Sea, sipping their champagne, watching the show. They dragged her out the heavy oak front doors and down the front steps. Her 2 suitcases were sitting on the gravel driveway. It was starting to rain. Please, Nora said to the guard, Steve. Steve, I don't have a car. He took the keys. Sorry, ma'am, Steve mumbled. Mr. Kensington said you have to wait for a taxi outside the main gate. You can't stay on the driveway. They walked her down the long, winding drive, past the fountains and the statues, all the way to the iron gates. They pushed her out, and the gate slammed shut with a final, metallic clang. Nora stood in the rain, in her green dress, shivering. Through the iron bars, she could see the warm glow of the mansion up on the hill. She could hear the music starting again. They were celebrating her eviction. She looked down at her phone. 14% battery. She dialed the only number she knew by heart. Arthur, she said, when the voice answered. It's time. Execute the protocol. For 3 weeks, Grant Kensington lived like a king. With Nora gone, the house underwent a transformation. Bella hated the old stuff, so she hired a team of designers to rip out the rose garden Nora had planted with her mother. They replaced the vintage mahogany library shelves with white lacquer. Grant felt lighter. He felt invincible. The divorce papers had been served, and Nora hadn't contested a single thing. No lawyers calling, no screaming matches, no demands for alimony. She had simply vanished. See, Grant told his CFO, Mark, over scotch one evening in the newly white library. She knew she had no leg to stand on. The prenup was bulletproof. I kept everything. The company, the accounts, the cars, the house. It's almost too quiet, Grant, Mark said, loosening his tie. Nora isn't stupid. She's quiet, but she's not stupid. You sure she's not planning something? What can she plan? Grant scoffed. She has 50 grand and a 10-year-old Honda Civic. She's probably crying on her sister's couch in Ohio. Grant walked over to the massive window, looking out over the estate. I'm going to develop the West Acre, he said, pointing to the dense forest that bordered the property. Condos, luxury eco-villas. I can probably squeeze 20 units in there. $5 million a pop. I thought that land was protected? Mark asked. Protected by who? Me. Grant grinned. It's all part of the estate. I own it all. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning. Grant was eating breakfast, an egg white omelette Bella had ordered from a private chef, when the intercom buzzed. Mr. Kensington, the security guard's voice crackled. It was a new guard. Steve had quit the day after Nora left. There's a construction crew at the gate. Excellent. Grant wiped his mouth. That's the team for the West Acre project. Let them in. No, sir. The guard hesitated. They aren't here for the West Acre. They're here for the gate. The gate? Grant frowned. What about the gate? They say they're here to remove it, sir. Grant threw his napkin down and stormed out of the house. He marched down the long driveway, Bella jogging to keep up in her heels. When he reached the bottom of the hill, he saw a massive yellow bulldozer and a truck with the logo Pendleton and Associates Construction. A man in a hard hat was standing by the keypad of the iron gate, holding a clipboard. "What the hell is going on here?" Grant shouted. "Get that machinery off my property." The man turned. He was older, calm, with thick glasses. He wasn't a construction worker. He was a suit wearing a hard hat. "Mr. Kensington?" the man asked. "I'm Grant Kensington, and I'm about to call the police if you don't move." "My name is Arthur Pendleton," the man said. "I represent the owner of this land. We are here to remove the unauthorized structure blocking the public access road." Grant blinked. "Unauthorized structure? This is the main gate to the Kensington estate. I own this land." Arthur smiled. It was a small, dangerous smile. He pulled a document from his clipboard. "Actually, Mr. Kensington, you own the house. Specifically, the structure known as 1400 Cliffside Drive. You own the bricks, the mortar, and the contents inside. However," Arthur flipped the page, "you do not own the land the house sits on. Nor do you own the driveway, the gardens, the pool area, or the surrounding 60 acres of forest." Grant snatched the paper. It was a copy of a land deed. It looked old. "This is garbage," Grant spat. "I bought this house from Nora's grandmother's estate 10 years ago. I paid $3 million for it." "You paid $3 million for the structure and a 99-year lease on the land," Arthur corrected. "A lease that had a very specific clause. Clause 4B. In the event of a dissolution of marriage between the leaseholder and a direct descendant of the Bennett family, the lease is immediately terminated, and the land reverts to the Bennett family trust." Grant froze. The blood drained from his face. "Nora is a direct descendant," Arthur continued. "You divorced her. The moment you filed those papers, your lease on this land expired. You are currently trespassing." "This is insane," Bella shrieked. "Grant, tell him he's crazy." "I have the deed in my safe," Grant yelled. "I saw it." "You saw the deed to the house," Arthur said calmly. "Did you ever check the plot survey numbers? The house occupies 0.4 acres. The estate is 64 acres. You own the house, Mr. Kensington. But Mrs. Kensington, she owns the ground you're standing on, and she wants her gate back," Arthur signaled to the bulldozer driver. The engine roared to life. "Wait, stop!" Grant screamed. But the bulldozer moved forward. With a sickening crunch of metal, the massive iron gate, a symbol of Grant's power, was ripped from its hinges and dragged into the street. "Have a nice day, Mr. Kensington," Arthur called out over the noise. "Oh, and you'll be receiving a bill for the removal." Grant stormed back up the driveway, his phone glued to his ear. "Get me my lawyer, now!" he screamed at his assistant. By the time he reached the house, his lawyer, a shark named Davidson, was on the line. "Davidson, some lunatic just tore down my gate. He claims I don't own the land." Grant was pacing in the foyer, his shoes squeaking on the marble. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Grant," Davidson's voice was hesitant. "I've been trying to reach you all morning. We just got a courier package from a firm called Pendleton, Vance and Associates." "So? Sue them." "I can't, Grant. I'm looking at the original title transfer from 10 years ago, the one your previous lawyer handled, the one you told me not to double-check because you wanted to save on fees." Grant felt a cold sweat break out on his neck. "What about it?" "It's true," Davidson whispered. "The land was never sold. It was held in a grantor-retained annuity trust under the name of Eleanor Bennett, Nora's grandmother. When Eleanor died, the trust passed to Nora. Grant, you own the house, but you don't have a right-of-way to get to it." "What does that mean?" "It means the driveway belongs to Nora. The sewage pipes running under the lawn belong to Nora. The power lines that cross the forest to get to the house belong to Nora." Grant dropped the phone. The lights in the hallway flickered. Then, with a buzzing sound, they went out. The hum of the refrigerator ceased. The smart home security panel went dark. "Grant?" Bella's voice came from the top of the stairs. "The Wi-Fi is down, and the lights are out." Grant ran to the window. Down at the bottom of the hill, where the utility poles connected to the main grid, he saw the construction crew again. They were disconnecting the lines. He grabbed his car keys. "I'm going to kill her," he muttered. "I'm going to drive over there and kill her." He ran out to the garage where his Ferrari, Bella's Porsche and his Range Rover were parked. He jumped into the Range Rover and hit the button for the garage door. Nothing happened. No power. Damn it! He pulled the emergency release cord and heaved the heavy door open manually. He jumped back in the car and roared out of the garage. He sped down the driveway, his tires kicking up gravel. But as he rounded the final curve before the exit, he slammed on the brakes. There was a concrete wall. In the last hour, while he was on the phone, the construction crew had placed massive, interlocking concrete jersey barriers across the driveway, 3 rows deep. There was no way out. A drone hovered overhead, buzzing like an angry hornet. Grant looked up. He knew she was watching. His phone pinged, a text message from an unknown number. He opened it. It was a PDF file titled "Offer to Sell." He opened it. It read, "Dear tenant, since you are currently occupying a structure on my land without a valid lease, you are in violation of property statutes. However, I am a reasonable woman. I am willing to sell you the land required for you to exit your driveway. Price for 50 feet of driveway access, 10,000. Price for sewage and electrical easement, 15,000. You have 24 hours to respond. After that, the rent for the land goes up to 50,000 a day." Sincerely, Nora Bennett, Landlord Grant, screamed and threw his phone against the dashboard. He was trapped. He was sitting in a multi-million-dollar mansion that was essentially a prison, with no power, no water, and no way out. But the worst part was yet to come. As he sat there fuming, he saw a police car pull up on the other side of the concrete barrier. "Thank God," Grant muttered. "They can arrest these people." He jumped out of the car and climbed up the concrete barrier, waving his arms. "Officer! Officer! Over here! I'm being held hostage!" The police officer stepped out of the car. He adjusted his belt and walked up to the barrier. He looked at Grant, then looked at a piece of paper in his hand. "Are you Grant Kensington?" the officer asked. "Yes. Yes, you have to help me. My ex-wife has blocked me in." "Mr. Kensington," the officer said, his face stone cold, "I have a warrant here for your arrest." Grant froze on top of the concrete wall. "Arrest? For what?" "Grand larceny, fraud, and embezzlement," the officer read. "It seems the corporate accounts for Kensington Global have been audited. A whistleblower provided evidence that you've been funneling company money into offshore accounts for 5 years. "Whistleblower?" Grant gasped. "Who?" The officer smirked. "A Mrs. Nora Bennett. She apparently had access to your Home Office safe for the last 10 years. She brought us the ledgers this morning." Grant looked back at the dark, silent mansion behind him. He looked at the police officer in front of him. And for the first time in his life, Grant Kensington realized he wasn't the player. He was the pawn. The smell of the county-holding cell was a mixture of industrial bleach, stale bologna, and human despair. For Grant Kensington, a man who hadn't worn a shirt that cost less than $600 in a decade, the sensation of the rough, orange polyester jumpsuit against his skin was a physical assault. He sat on the metal cot, staring at the concrete floor. It had been 48 hours since the police plucked him off the concrete barrier at the bottom of his driveway. 48 hours of questions he couldn't answer, and coffee that tasted like battery acid. "Kensington!" a guard barked, rapping his baton against the bars. "Legal visit. Move it." Grant scrambled up. "Is it Davidson? Tell him I want me out of here now." The guard didn't answer. He cuffed Grant's wrists and marched him down the linoleum hallway to the visitation room. Grant was expecting the sleek, predatory face of his high-priced defense attorney, Davidson. He was ready to scream, to demand why bail hadn't been posted yet. But when the heavy metal door buzzed open, Davidson wasn't there. Sitting on the other side of the thick, reinforced glass was Nora. She looked different. In the 3 days since he had thrown her out, she had transformed. She wasn't wearing the dowdy clothes he usually forced her to wear to make herself invisible. She was wearing a sharp, tailored blazer in midnight blue, her hair blown out in soft waves, and, most infuriatingly, she was wearing the diamond necklace he had accused her of losing. Grant sat down, the chains on his wrists clanking loudly. He leaned toward the microphone grate. "You have a lot of nerve coming here," Grant hissed, his eyes bloodshot. "You think this is funny? I'll have your head for this, Nora. False accusations, theft of documents. I'll sue you until you're begging on the street." Nora didn't flinch. She placed a manicured hand on the counter and leaned in, her expression one of mild curiosity, as if she were looking at a particularly interesting insect in a jar. "Hello, Grant," she said, her voice smooth and calm. "You look tired." "Cut the act," Grant snapped. "Tell the police this is a mistake. Tell them you forged those ledgers. If you do, I might let you keep the car." Nora laughed. It was a genuine light sound that echoed in the sterile room. "Oh, Grant, you still don't understand, do you? I didn't forge anything. I didn't have to." She reached into her bag and pulled out a file folder, holding it up to the glass. "Do you remember in 2018, when you fired your forensic accountant because he told you the offshore shell companies were too risky?" Nora asked. "You replaced him with a firm called Vance and Stratton. So? They were cheap and efficient." "They were cheap because they didn't exist," Nora said softly. "Vance is my mother's maiden name. Stratton was the name of my first dog. I created the firm, Grant. I registered it. I built the website. And for the last 7 years, I have been your accountant." Grant felt the blood drain from his face. The room started to spin. You did the taxes?" "I did everything," Nora nodded. "I set up the shell companies in the Caymans. I routed the money from the construction projects. I balanced the books to hide your affairs with Bella and Jessica and that receptionist from the Miami office." "You helped me," Grant shouted, slamming his fist against the counter. "That makes you an accomplice." "No," Nora corrected him, her eyes turning steely. "I was gathering evidence. I was waiting. I kept a duplicate set of every single transaction. The real books. And the moment you threw me out of my own house, I emailed the entire zip file to the SEC, the IRS, and the district attorney." Grant slumped back in his chair. He felt like he had been punched in the gut. All those late nights he spent working, ignoring her, thinking she was just a dumb housewife watching TV. She had been in the next room, methodically building his coffin. "Why?" Grant whispered. "If you knew, why wait 10 years?" "Because of the clause," Nora said simply. "The land deed. My grandmother was a smart woman, Grant. The trust stipulated that I couldn't access the full rights to the estate until I was 35 or divorced. If I had left you, you would have fought me for half of everything. But by waiting, by letting you throw me out, you triggered the abandonment and malice clause in the prenuptial agreement you were so proud of." She tapped the glass with her fingernail. "You breached the contract first, Grant. Which means the prenup is void. And since I have proof that the initial capital used to start Kensington Global came from a joint account using my inheritance, I don't just own the land, Grant. I own 51% of your company." Grant stared at her, his mouth open, unable to form words. He had built his entire identity on being the smartest man in the room, and the woman he had treated like furniture had outplayed him at every single turn. "Davidson isn't coming, by the way," Nora added, standing up and smoothing her blazer. "I froze the corporate retainer account this morning. He doesn't work for free." "And Bella?" Grant looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Where is she?" "She's currently giving a statement to the FBI," Nora said. "She's trading testimony against you for immunity. Turns out she kept the diamond bracelet you bought her with embezzled funds. That's interstate commerce fraud, Grant. 5 to 10 years. Nora turned to leave. "Wait!" Grant screamed, standing up, straining against the cuffs. "Nora, you can't leave me here. I have nothing. I can't survive in here." Nora stopped at the door. She looked back over her shoulder, her face void of emotion. "You have the Honda," she said. "Oh, wait, no. I took that back, too. Goodbye, Grant." The door buzzed shut, leaving Grant alone in the silence, the echo of her heels clicking down the hallway, the only sound in his world. Grant Kensington was not a man who accepted defeat. Even after the humiliation in the visitation room, even after spending 3 weeks in county lockup, he found a way to claw back. He liquidated his personal watch collection, smuggled out by a sympathetic junior paralegal, and scraped together enough cash for a bail bondsman. It cost him a fortune, and he was forced to wear an ankle monitor. But on a rainy Tuesday in November, Grant walked out of the jail. He had no car, no credit cards. His bank accounts were frozen pending the federal investigation. But he still had the key to the front door of the mansion. "She says I don't own the land," Grant muttered to himself as he walked along the side of the highway, rain soaking his ruined suit. "Fine. But possession is 9/10 of the law. If I'm inside the house, they can't tear it down." He couldn't take a taxi. He had no money. He had to hitchhike part of the way, getting picked up by a truck driver hauling fertilizer who recognized him from the news and spent 20 minutes laughing at him. When Grant finally reached the bottom of Cliffside Drive, the scene was worse than he remembered. The concrete barriers were still there, blocking the driveway. But now, they were reinforced with barbed wire. A large sign was posted on the concrete. Private property. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. Managed by Pendleton Trust. Grant gritted his teeth. He looked at the dense forest to the left of the driveway. The West Acre he had wanted to bulldoze for condos. It was thick with brambles, mud, and steep ravines. I'm not trespassing if I'm going to my own house, he rationalized. He climbed over the guardrail and plunged into the woods. Immediately, his Italian loafers sank into 6 inches of mud. Thorny vines tore at his suit jacket. He slipped and fell twice, sliding down a muddy embankment and tearing his pants. It took him 2 hours to hike the half-mile up the hill. By the time he broke through the tree line and onto the manicured lawn of the estate, he looked like a wild animal. He was covered in mud, bleeding from a scratch on his cheek and shivering uncontrollably. But there it was. The mansion. His palace. He ran across the lawn, expecting security to stop him. But there was no one. The grounds were silent. The grass was getting long. The landscapers obviously hadn't been paid. He reached the front door and jammed his key into the lock. It wouldn't turn. No, he groaned. No, no, no. He tried again. Nothing. She had changed the locks. Open up, he screamed, pounding on the heavy wood. Nora, I know you're watching. Open this door. It's my house. The deed says it's my house. There was no answer. He ran around to the back, to the patio doors, locked. He picked up a heavy garden stone and smashed the glass pane of the kitchen door. The alarm started blaring, a piercing, shrieking sound that echoed across the valley. "Let it ring!" Grant yelled maniacally. He reached in, unlocked the door, and stumbled into the kitchen. The silence inside was heavy. The air was stale. He ran to the refrigerator and yanked it open. A wave of stench hit him so hard he gagged. The power had been off for weeks. The gourmet food inside, the caviar, the Wagyu beef, the organic milk, had all rotted. Black mold was growing on the shelves. Maggots were crawling in the vegetable drawer. Power, he gasped. I need power. He ran to the basement utility room. He knew there was a backup generator. A massive industrial diesel generator capable of powering the house for a month. He found it in the dark. Fumbling with a flashlight he found in a drawer. He checked the fuel gauge. Empty. Grant kicked the generator. She drained it. She drained the damn fuel. He went back upstairs, exhausted or thirsty and cold. He collapsed onto the white sofa in the living room, leaving streaks of mud on the pristine fabric. I'm not leaving, he whispered to the empty room. I'll sit here in the dark. I'll drink rainwater. But I am not leaving my house. The alarm finally timed out and shut off. The silence returned. Then Grant heard a sound, a mechanical whirring. He walked to the window. Outside, on the edge of the lawn, just past the property line, where the house plot ended and the Bennett land began, a truck was backing up. It was a massive flatbed truck carrying portable floodlights, 4 of them. Men jumped out and set up the lights, aiming them directly at the house, specifically at the master bedroom and the living room windows. What is this? Grant shielded his eyes. Suddenly, with a hum of electricity, the lights snapped on. They were blindingly bright, stadium-quality LEDs. They flooded the house with a harsh, white glare that eliminated every shadow. It was like standing on the surface of the sun. Grant squeezed his eyes shut. He grabbed the curtains to pull them closed, but Bella had removed the heavy drapes 2 months ago to let the light in. There were only sheer blinds. They did nothing. Then came the sound. A wall of speakers had been set up next to the lights. A moment later, music began to blast. But it wasn't music. It was a recording. It was a recording of a baby crying, a looping, high-pitched, distressed wail of an infant. Grant covered his ears. "Stop it! Stop it!" He saw a figure standing by the truck, holding a walkie-talkie. Even from this distance, he recognized the silhouette. It was Arthur Pendleton, the lawyer. Grant ran out onto the balcony. "This is harassment. I'll call the cops." Arthur picked up a megaphone. His voice boomed across the lawn, distorted but clear. "Mr. Kensington, good evening. We are currently conducting a psychological stress test for a new security system on the Bennett land. We apologize for the inconvenience. The test is scheduled to last for 72 hours. You can't do this, Grant screamed. Actually, we can, Arthur replied cheerfully. We are within the decibel limits for daytime industrial testing, and the lights are on our property. If the glare is bothering you, feel free to plant some trees. Oh, wait, you can't. You don't own the soil. Grant stumbled back inside. The baby crying was relentless. The light was inescapable. He tried to go to the basement, but without power, the sump pumps hadn't worked, and the basement was flooded with 3 inches of cold, sewage-tainted water. He was trapped in a glass box, illuminated for the world to see, being tortured by sound. He tried to sleep on the sofa, burying his head under cushions, but the crying penetrated everything. Hour after hour, night turned into day, but he couldn't tell, because the lights never turned off. By the second day, Grant was hallucinating. He was hungry. He was dehydrated. He had resorted to drinking water from the toilet tank in the guest bathroom because the taps were dry. He lay on the floor of the hallway, the only spot with a shadow, shivering. I built this, he mumbled, rocking back and forth. I am Grant Kensington. I am a king. Click. The front door opened. Grant froze. He looked up, squinting against the glare. 2 men walked in. They weren't police. They weren't lawyers. They were wearing moving company uniforms. Hey, buddy, one of the movers said, looking down at Grant with disgust. You gotta move. We're here for the furniture. What? Grant croaked. My furniture? Not according to this work order, the mover said. Says here all furniture was purchased via the Bennett Trust Home Improvement Fund. It's being repossessed by the owner. Behind the movers, Nora walked in. She was wearing a construction-hard hat and a yellow vest over her designer dress. She held a clipboard. She stepped over Grant's legs as if he were a pile of dirty laundry. Take the sofa first, she instructed the men. Then the art. Be careful with the Picasso. It's worth more than his bail. Nora, Grant rasped, grabbing the hem of her dress. Please, I surrender. Just make it stop. Turn off the lights. Nora looked down. Her eyes were cold, void of the love that had been there for 10 years. Surrender implies you have something left to fight with, Grant, she said. You don't. The house is legally uninhabitable. The health department is on their way to condemn it due to the sewage backup in the basement. I tipped them off an hour ago. Condemn? Grant's eyes widened. But the structure... Once it's condemned, it's a safety hazard, Nora explained calmly. And as the landowner, I have a legal obligation to remove safety hazards from my property. She leaned in close. I'm bulldozing the house, Grant, today. With you inside it, if you don't move. Grant looked at her, and he saw the absolute truth in her eyes. She would do it. She would tear down her childhood home just to bury him. I have nowhere to go, he sobbed. I know, Nora said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. It was a bus ticket. One way to Ohio, she said, dropping it on his chest. My sister says you can sleep on her porch if you shovel the snow, but she charges rent. Grant Kensington, the billionaire genius, the titan of industry, crawled out of the house on his hands and knees. He crawled past the movers, past the blinding lights, and onto the muddy grass of the land he didn't own. As he reached the tree line, he heard the roar of the engines. The bulldozers were coming up the hill. The demolition of 1400 Cliffside Drive became a local spectacle. It wasn't just a house being torn down. It was a public execution of an ego. Local news crews set up cameras on the perimeter of the Bennett land. Nora had granted them permission to film. She wanted the world to see. Grant Kensington sat in the back of a police cruiser, watching through the window as the excavator's claw smashed through the glass wall of the master bedroom. He watched as the steel beams he had imported from Germany twisted like licorice. He watched as the white marble floors shattered into dust. He had been arrested for violating a restraining order when he refused to leave the tree line, screaming threats at the movers. But the police hadn't taken him to the station immediately. The officer, a veteran named Sergeant Miller, who had grown up in the town and despised what Grant had done to the local economy, decided to let Grant watch the show for a few minutes. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Miller asked from the driver's seat. "It's worth $10 million, Grant wept, his face pressed against the glass. "That rubble is worth more than your life." "It's worth nothing now," Miller said, putting the car in gear. "It's just trash on Miss Bennett's lawn." The trial of the century. 3 months later, the Kensington fraud trial began. It was the most talked about event in the state. Nora did not attend a single day of it. She didn't need to. The documents she had provided to the district attorney were devastating. The courtroom was packed. Grant's defense was a disaster. Since all his assets were frozen or seized by the SEC, he was forced to use a court-appointed public defender, a tired, overworked man named Arthur Higgins, who smelled of stale tobacco and seemed more interested in his crossword puzzles than Grant's defense. Mr. Kensington, the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Sarah Vance, no relation to Nora's fake firm, but the irony was not lost on Grant, paced in front of the jury. "You claim that you were unaware of the shell companies. You claim that your wife, Nora Bennett, orchestrated the entire embezzlement scheme to frame you." "She did!" Grant shouted from the stand, ignoring his lawyer's frantic signaling to shut up. "She's a mastermind. She's evil. She planned this for 10 years. Sarah Vance smiled. She clicked a button on her remote, and a video projected onto the courtroom screen. It was footage from a hidden camera inside Grant's private office. On screen, Grant was sitting with Bella, drinking scotch. The date stamp was 2 years prior. "Grant, are you sure moving the pension fund to the Cayman account is safe?" Bella asked in the video. "It's fine, babe," Grant laughed, puffing on a cigar. "Nora is too stupid to check the books, and the auditors are in my pocket. We take the $5 million, buy the yacht, and write it off as research and development. By the time anyone notices, we'll be in Monaco." The courtroom gasped. The jury stared at Grant with unmasked disgust. Grant sat in the witness box, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He looked at the screen, then at the jury. That's a deep fake," he stammered. "AI generated. It's a conspiracy." "The video was recorded on your own internal security system, Mr. Kensington," Vance said dryly. "The one you installed to spy on your employees. Nora just guessed the password. It was Grantisking, wasn't it?" The verdict took less than 2 hours. Guilty on 14 counts of wire fraud. Guilty on 6 counts of tax evasion. Guilty on 3 counts of money laundering. The sentence was handed down by Magistrate Cohen, a stern man who had no patience for white-collar criminals. "Grant Kensington, You are sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Furthermore, you are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $45 million to the shareholders of Kensington Global. Since you have no remaining assets, your future wages will be garnished at a rate of 80% for the remainder of your natural life. As the bailiffs cuffed him, Grant looked back at the gallery, searching for a friendly face. There was no one. Bella had already taken a plea deal and was living in witness protection in Arizona. His business partners had disavowed him. The only person he recognized was standing at the very back of the room, near the exit. It was Nora. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't gloating. She just looked at him with a profound, heavy sadness. She nodded once, a final goodbye to the man she had wasted a decade on, and turned to walk out into the sunlight. Grant screamed her name as they dragged him through the side door, but she didn't look back. The resurrection of the land. While Grant rotted in a minimum security facility in upstate New York, Nora went to work. The mansion was gone. In its place, she didn't build another house. She didn't want to live on that hill anymore. The memories were too tainted. Instead, she contacted the Pendleton Trust and initiated the Green Legacy Project. She spent the next 2 years transforming the 64-acre estate into a public nature reserve and rehabilitation center for injured wolves and local wildlife. It was a nod to the wolves Grant had thrown her to. Where the marble foyer had been, she planted a grove of ancient redwood trees, imported to restore the land's original ecosystem. Where the infinity pool had been, she built a natural pond for waterfowl. The West Acre, which Grant had wanted to turn into condos, became a hiking trail for the city's residents. Nora moved into a modest, charming cottage on the other side of town. She started a forensic accounting firm for women going through high-conflict divorces. She became a legend in the city, the avenging angel of assets. Women who were being hidden from, lied to, or financially abused by powerful husbands came to her. And Nora found the money, always. She was happy. She was free. But the story wasn't quite over. The universe had one final twist in store. 5 years passed. Grant Kensington was released early on good behavior and overcrowding issues. He was 55 years old, but he looked 70. His hair was thin and white. His confident, booming voice was reduced to a raspy cough. He had nothing. No money, no friends, no reputation. The restitution order meant that he couldn't hold a bank account with more than $500 in it. He was unhireable in the business world. He found a job as a night janitor at a shopping mall in the suburbs. It was grueling, humiliating work. He spent his nights mopping floors under fluorescent lights, listening to the echoes of his own failures. One rainy Tuesday night, Grant was emptying the trash bins near the mall's food court. He saw a discarded newspaper on a table. He picked it up. The headline read, "Local philanthropist, Nora Bennett reveals century-old family secret at park opening." Grant's hands shook as he sat down on a plastic chair to read. The article described the grand opening of the Eleanor Bennett Nature Reserve, his former estate. It mentioned Nora's speech, but it was the sidebar that caught Grant's eye. It was titled, "The Letter from the Grave." The article explained that during the landscaping of the property, workers had unearthed a time capsule buried by Nora's grandmother, Eleanor Bennett, the year Nora married Grant. Inside the capsule was a letter addressed to Nora, to be opened only if the land ever reverted back to her name. Grant read the excerpt printed in the paper. "My dearest Nora, if you are reading this, it means my suspicions were correct. I never trusted Grant. I saw the way he looked at the house. Not at you. I saw the greed in his eyes when he asked about the zoning rights, before he asked for your hand in marriage. I knew I couldn't stop you from marrying him. You were young and in love. But I could protect our legacy. I structured the deed and the trust specifically for this outcome. I knew a man like him would eventually try to discard you when he thought he had extracted all your value. I wanted to ensure that when he did, he would lose the one thing he loved more than himself: his status. The land was never the trap, Nora. The trap was his own arrogance. I gave him the rope, knowing he would hang himself. Do not mourn the time you lost with him. Consider it tuition paid at the University of Life. Now, build something beautiful. Love, Grandma Eleanor. Grant dropped the newspaper. It fluttered to the dirty mall floor. It wasn't just a legal loophole. It wasn't just bad luck. He had been played from the very beginning. An old woman he had dismissed as senile and irrelevant had read him like a book 10 years before he even made his first move. He had walked into a trap set by a ghost. Grant looked up. Across the food court, on a massive LED advertising screen, a commercial began to play. It was for Bennett and Associates. On the screen, Nora looked radiant. She was older, lines of wisdom around her eyes, wearing a simple white suit. She looked into the camera, her gaze direct and piercing. "Don't let them take what's yours," Nora said in the commercial. "Know your worth. And read the fine print." She smiled, a genuine, victorious smile. Grant stared at the screen until the loop ended, and the advertisement changed to a burger commercial. He looked down at his mop bucket. He looked at his grey, stained uniform. He let out a laugh, a dry, wheezing laugh that turned into a sob. He stood up, grabbed his mop, and went back to cleaning the floor. He had missed a spot near the garbage can, and if he didn't finish the section by 6 a.m., his supervisor would write him up. He was Grant Kensington, and he had work to do. Grant Kensington spent a decade building a fortress on a foundation of sand, never realizing that the true power lay in the hands of the woman he underestimated. He thought he could throw his wife away like yesterday's trash, but he forgot the most important rule of real estate and of life. Always know who holds the deed. Nora didn't just get revenge, she got justice. She proved that dignity and patience are stronger than greed and arrogance. Grant ended up cleaning floors, while Nora cleaned up the corrupt system he thrived in. What do you think? Did Grant deserve his fate, or was the grandmother's trap too cruel? Would you have had the patience to wait 10 years like Nora did? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. We have a crazy tale coming up next week about a gold digger who accidentally married a broke undercover billionaire. You won't want to miss it.